there, this is Melissa Joy, and I'm joined by Beth Johnston. And today we're talking about travel planning in 2020, what you need to know. This is a great presentation for you if you're looking to deepen your planning for travel and know the trends for what's next. So let's get started. Welcome, Beth. I want to take a minute for you to introduce yourself as we get started. You're a travel professional and expert in the field.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today talking about what's happening in travel. I am a retired teacher of 30 plus years. My background on travel, I've always been an avid traveler. My parents were both educators. We grew up taking a different kind of route than I take now. That would be the camping route. And
I love it.
I kind of graduated on from camping, but as a child, I loved it. We packed up in a VW camper, 3 kids and the dog, and off we went. We traveled across the U.S. and Canada, visited most of the national parks, had some wonderful experiences visiting family and friends, and those are some of my nearest and dearest memories from childhood. So after that, I actually ended up getting my degree in travel and tourism from Michigan State University. I went in to be a teacher, but ended up with a travel and tourism degree, got out of college, and went back and got my teaching certificate and did my 30 years in elementary education as a principal and teacher. And after my destination wedding in 2016, I had to think back, became a travel advisor. So here I am.
Everything comes full circle, and I think that the way, having known you for a little bit, the way you approach travel is educational. So you're putting together all of the elements of your experience in education to provide a resource to the clients that you work with.
It's all about creating better global citizens.
I love it. So today we really want to provide some resources that are up to date, fresh, about what is going on with travel right now. We'll have some travel do's and don'ts, how to research and plan for travel, some of the important trends in travel, like travel for retirement or multi-generational travel. And it's important for me to share why you might want to work with a travel professional. It's not for everyone, but certainly I think there's some benefits and resources that are a fit for many of the clients that I work with. So why don't we get started, Beth?
Sounds good.
I think one of the most important things, some people have a very clear picture. They're like, I'm going here and there and here next, or some people never change. You know, they're going, this is where their family summers or, you know, spends their weekends, and that's the priority. But for everyone in between, how do you decide where you want to go over time and what's next?
So that's actually one of the first things you really want to think about is, where do you want to go? I mean, most of us have a bucket list. There are certain experiences or destinations that we know we want to have. And so actually there's a new tool out that does this for you. But if you don't want to go that route right away, you can just start Googling things. Google's become a huge trend and people use it all the time. Maybe your friends have gone someplace and that's an interest to you. Maybe you saw something at some point in time, even like TV shows like Game of Thrones, right? Or Downton Abbey or whatever. Those give you some inspiration for travel as well. So I recommend just kind of sitting down and making a list. And Wanderlist, which is a new travel planning portfolio tool, is one way to do that. They have over 160 different destinations in there, along with experiences that you can have in those destinations, and it helps you narrow down your field. You can give it a thumbs up, you can say I've already been there but I want to go back, you can give it a thumbs down, or you can prioritize into your top choices.
Well, oftentimes for me in financial planning, one of the most successful elements of organization is prioritization. So having gone through anecdotally the Wonder List with my family, where each of you individually provides your preferences, and then you provide a report and software which gives the overlap. It's exploratory. It takes everyone's kind of perspective into consideration. So if there's a stronger voice in the room, let's not, maybe me, then we can acknowledge the other participants. And in our case, we had Jeff, my husband, my son Gus, who's a 5th grader, as well as my parents. Both all provided their preferences, and it was a really interesting report to help us think long term about what we'd like to do next.
Right. So Wanderlist it feels a little bit like a psychology tool in some respects, because everybody gets their choices. It's done separately. So as you said, nobody has a stronger voice. And then I pull it all together. So there's a high-tech kind of portion to it with sort of a Netflixy thing that gets people engaged, especially with all of the videos that you can watch, or the information about the destination, the photos, the resources that are attached to each destination. And then I take that, I come in, I'm the high touch, the personal touch.
The consultant.
Yes, and I come in and sort of curate and look at all of everybody's choices and give you some insights that then you end up with your family kind of making this 3 to 5 year plan with me for your bucket list travel.
So what are you hearing? What's the biggest trends? I know New York Times came out with a 52 places to go just in the last few days, which was fascinating.
Yes.
But whenever I see any place, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. So what are you seeing as the hot new places, or what are you talking about with people?
So some of the destinations that remain kind of in the top are like Italy, certain trends like multi-gen travel, authentic travel. And authentic just means that you're delving into a destination in a more authentic way. You're not just doing surface, top
museum admissions.
Yes, absolutely. You're going to the market with somebody, picking the food out and creating a dinner in Italy,
I have a friend,
right?
yeah, I have a friend who just went to Italy, and I think she made olive oil, brought back limoncello that she had made, was in cooking classes. So yeah.
Yeah, so some other things that are kind of coming up are, well, I would say that things that people like to do, celebration travel is huge. There's a huge push for like anniversary travel, high school graduation. I mean, think about it. You only have 18 summers with your kids, right? And then they're off on their own.
Don't scare me.
So you want to make the most of it. So doing things together as a family, so family trips as well as sort of adventure, active travel. We're all into wellness these days, and doing things in locations where there's a lot of adventure or activity is also a big trend.
That makes sense. The world seems so much, I don't know if flatter, but it's more accessible than it has ever been. I think that the access to information that we all have is beneficial, and certainly, preferences are constantly changing, but there are those, kind of standard preferences as well. So you've got to pay for this travel though, and I would say that you pay for it with time and money. So how do you suggest people look at the time aspect of planning for travel in their busy lives?
First of all, you have to make it a priority. So Americans are notoriously bad at taking their vacation time. And more companies are trying to encourage people. In fact, they're purchasing Wanderlist for their employees so that they do take advantage of
that's really interesting.
Yeah, so they do take advantage of their vacation time, because what ends up happening is they're more productive when they return from time off. So one of the things you have to do is sort of say, okay, we're going to take this family trip, we're going to make the time to do it, and then sit down and kind of prioritize when and how that can happen. And so if you have younger children, you're going to have to look at vacation times, but a lot of people are deciding to pull younger children out of school for a week. And as a former educator, if I had a child who was traveling and doing something kind of unique and different, I encourage that. I encourage them to go off and explore the world, and maybe to do some journaling about the experience and come back and share about it. But those kinds of trips are going to give just as much education as sitting in the classroom sometimes. Some of my educator friends might disagree with me, but that's okay.
I've definitely noticed that trend too. I know families go to Disney oftentimes because it gets so crowded in those break times during the school year. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it to you, but my husband and his family went on a sailing trip when he was in kindergarten for 6 months. And he had his kindergarten coursework with him.
Absolutely.
But he was writing about, going to Montreal and meeting a boy who spoke French and things like that. And those memories and that experience and adventure has stuck with him, 40 years later.
Absolutely. And so I think that in today's world, especially if we expose our children to different cultures, different ways of living, that we're going to ultimately benefit society, because they're going to be more accepting of all different types of people and become better global citizens.
We're going to talk in a minute about retirement travel, but one of the things that I've noticed is people can get very stressed and also just, mired in their job where it feels like a lot. And if you can negotiate or really intentionally use the time that you've accumulated for some real breaks, and travel does have, it blocks off your time because, first of all, your time is planned.
Right.
You're not sitting on your phone. Second, there's often barriers, either you're on a different part of the world, so you're not, you're asleep during your working hours, or, you're just naturally, people respect boundaries a little bit more if you're at a destination. I think that's one way to potentially extend your working years, is to really take travel seriously at a time that you can afford it, when you're super stressed in life with your work and you're just like, I want to retire today. The numbers might not work that way. I'd much rather you expand your travel budget and make that work and work a couple more years.
Right. I often say disconnect to reconnect.
I love it. Yes. So we do have to talk about dollars and cents as well. I'm a financial planner, so I would be remiss if I didn't address that. And when I think about ways that you may be able to plan travel, first, Beth, you will talk to people and tell them, here's the shoulder season where it may be a lower cost and maybe less crowded. This is a time to think about. Right now is in January, February is a time where there's a lot of travel is on sale, so to speak. People are trying to make sure that they have capacity or at capacity in some trips. What are some of the key times or
So as everybody knows, summer is often one of the top travel times for most destinations, partly because of weather, but also because of time off. So I think that if you're looking at shoulder season or low season, as you mentioned, you're going to get a better bang for your buck. You're also going to get more authentic experiences because the crowds will be less. Another thing to kind of think about when you're trying to budget is country pairings. So for instance, if you really want to see both Greece and Italy, why not combine those two in one trip so that you're saving on airfare and able to maximize your time to those destinations. A huge push in travel right now is sustainability, right? So by saving on airfare, you're not only saving money on airfare, but you're also saving the planet.
You're reducing the carbon footprint of your travel.
Absolutely. So, right. So budgeting for travel, it can mean a lot of different things. And there are ways in the Wanderlist tool that help you with that. So it does give you a budget forecast as well as your 3 to 5 year travel plans, your bucket list. And there's not another tool out there that does that. So this is sort of new and innovative, and especially in the financial planning world, for financial planners to be able to help their clients with that travel budget. If they have a better knowledge of what it's going to cost overall for their trips for those years, then they can help them better plan their finances for that.
I think things are more easily accomplished. It's easier to accomplish them than people would think, because in bigger trips you often prepay. Mm-hmm. So you might have to put down 50% of the hotel or condo deposit early. You're certainly buying your plane tickets earlier. You're making that decision. You may have 9 months to plan.
Right.
And then you may even prepay for experiences.
Yes.
And so it's not that if you kind of reshape and get this planning orientation going, you do have more time to kind of eat the elephant, so to speak,
right,
of the cost. And so it's really important to know that you have, the fundamentals of your needs kind of set aside, that you're meeting you're contributing to retirement, you have appropriate emergency reserves, etc. But after that, if you say travel's a goal and you want to be doing it right now and over time, then we can incorporate that into your financial planning and your decision making.
Right, and there are ways that you can also supplement that with. We can talk about like Sky Miles or credit cards that give points back, or hotel points, or whatever. There are different ways that you can maximize your travel budget with those tools as well.
Of course. So I often, some people, it's dollar in, dollar out for your cash and miles, and that's great. I like to use them as kind of a bank, so that as a self-employed person with variable income, I've got my miles set aside for that year where maybe there's a bigger expenditure, a bigger need for investment in the business, or my revenue's lower, so that I know that cushion can kind of help me in a time where I don't want to spend as much. Also, I think it's great if you can tack on some personal adventure with a business trip, because oftentimes you could cut down on the airline costs. Maybe the family meets you after a conference or something like that. And again, that's a lower carbon footprint. You're potentially, you often can be near nice resort type destinations. And so, there's a bunch of hacks, watching for flights that are more reasonable, etc. So you can shop around and compare rates. So there's a lot that you can consider.
Right. So one of the things that I do with flights is use Google Flights for kind of tracking. You can set a track for that, and if I know I'm going someplace, I'll put that in, and then it'll give me updates via email as to whether the price has gone up or down, and then I can kind of get it at a better deal. So
I also think that if so a lot of times we'll incorporate travel, since we know people all over the country, or I do both, professionally and because I've moved over the years, and so with my friends, then we may pick a destination where there's a couple days we could stay with friends. And we might stay at a budget hotel or motel for a couple days, and that leaves us some, it feels more reasonable to splurge on a couple days as well.
Right.
Especially if you're going to spend more time on the property, or splurge on an experience. So, it doesn't have to be everything's 5-star or everything's 2-star. You can, if you're going, we're planning a trip to the Pacific Northwest and doing just that. Like, we're considering staying with friends for a couple days on the vacation, maybe some interesting, like, nearly camping experiences in national parks. And then, is there a family type resort where it would be nice to just hang out in the pool for a day?
Right. And often, I think people don't understand that travel advisors can often help with, I would want to term it as more value for your trip. So better value, which is kind of I have an affiliation with a consortia called Virtuoso, which is a luxury travel consortia. And so there are perks that my clients get through me being affiliated with them. If they stay at a certain hotel, they might get breakfast every day, which can be a huge savings when you're looking at a family of four, and kind of planning for those type of experiences with a little bit more
elements of surprise, and like it just gives you a little more being taken care of.
Right.
So let's say we pick the destination, your budget is intact, you know you have some money to work with. What are some of the elements of planning and research? And I guess I would start out, Beth, you and I have worked together. I did a family vacation with Jeff, my husband, and my kindergartner and fifth grader last summer to Switzerland. And I kind of got to a point where we'd purchased the train ticket or the plane tickets. We knew we were staying with friends for the first half. But then I was stalled where I wanted this experience. I didn't know when we would be back. I wanted it to be meaningful. I wanted to cover a lot of ground. And I didn't feel like I had the time or the resources to plan the specific details. With the amount of time, we were doing the trip pretty quickly, and you stepped in to help us with some experiences. So I'd like to use that as a example, but how can a travel professional step in, or what should you be doing after you kind of book the tickets, you're going?
Right. So you want to have some clue as to what the costs are going to be for your travel. So kind of just even, like I said, tracking and Google your flights just to see what those are going to be, and then maybe looking at hotels that you might like to stay at and what's that pricing going to be, and then having sort of a realistic expectation for, as we were talking about, for your budget. But then also you can go online and look at things like TripAdvisor if you're wanting to look at recommendations for things. One of the things that I love with Wanderlist and Virtuoso and all of that is that it helps take that planning and put it into a source that I can use to get to know my clients better. So if I have a better idea of what you like, what your husband likes, what your children like, then I can plan an experience that you're all going to really enjoy. And like we did with you, we looked at some of those on-site excursion people that were going to be able to offer you something that the whole family could enjoy. And what I love about Virtuoso is that all of those suppliers and people that I use, that I book my clients with, they are vetted in a lot of different ways. There are very strict and high standards for the people they use across the world, and so I feel confident in knowing that you're going to have a good experience.
Yeah, we did a couple different experiences that were with your Virtuoso travel partners. So we did a walking tour of Zurich, and it was great that we did it the first day that we got there. So we got in at like 10 or 11 a.m., ran over to the hotel, but we did our walking tour at about 2 p.m. and it gave us the lay of the land of the city.
Sure.
We're traveling with a 6 and 10-year-old, so when I looked at the groups, the hot, sweaty groups of 50 to 75 people following one person who's speaking in 3 languages and holding up a box to your ear, I was just thinking, oh, we probably would have bailed on that tour halfway in. The kids didn't want to hear about the history of Zurich as much as we did, but we were able to, have that conversation in a park while the kids were on a playground.
Right.
And then we knew the lay of the land to really feel confident getting around in the city, knowing where we could go eat. So it wasn't like we had paid for experiences for 24/7,
right.
But we were really getting some great highlights. And then we took another trip to Germany in a private car, so we were able to, again, cover a lot of ground. I don't know if the kids if we had to leave on a bus at 6 a.m.
Sure.
And, eat wherever we were dropped off, and you could do the same tour in a group of 100 people. But this was very much geared toward our family.
Right. And then you could say, if the kids were getting tired, okay, we're going to skip this portion. Let's go on and do this next one because I know they're going to enjoy eating chocolate.
Right. And now there's wonderful podcasts too. So if you're a DIY traveler, you can listen to all types of different podcasts. For me, I was like Googling mommy bloggers who were expats who lived in Switzerland to find where they take their kids.
Right.
And that gave me some wonderful, very low cost resources that were great experiences where we felt like we were doing what a Swiss family might do on the weekend.
Right. I do a lot of blogging too, and
Right.
try and cater my blogs to things that I think my travelers or clients are going to want.
That's wonderful. So we've gone over some helpful tips. You've mentioned, Beth, set your alerts for Google Flights, check TripAdvisor is something that you can see ratings, you can see what's going on. They may or may not be accurate in terms of prices for hotels and excursions, but they have some good resources.
They do, and I used to do that all the time before I became a travel advisor. So it helped me when I was doing my own personal travel before then. And I don't, and like I said, just take it caution. Don't believe everything you read on there, but go ahead and look and see if most of it's good. And then of course the next tip is to make sure that there's a balance in your trip. Don't overbook yourself on things to do. You're going to want, especially if you travel like far away to Hawaii or Europe or someplace, you want to have a day to kind of regroup, because that flight and travel day is exhausting in and of itself. You wouldn't want to plan an excursion right when you get there. But like you said, also making sure you plan something that kind of gives you an overview, so that then later you can go back and say, oh yeah, we saw that on our tour. Let's go back there today and eat there, right?
Right, totally. And it's okay to plan in nap time.
Yes,
it's going to enhance the overall experience.
My husband needs nap time on our vacations.
And our family, maybe the parents do more than the kids. We were laughing before because when we went to, it was our first international travel with kids, and I needed to renew my passport at the same time. We knew we were going, and you have to jump through a couple extra hoops to get kids' passports. So I had to expedite passports knowingly. And it's important to double check and make sure you have everything you need before you go. And that's another, you were reminding me when we did our excursion to Germany, you need to bring your passport because we're going to go through a border,
right,
etc.
And some people don't know that in certain countries, your passport has to not only be valid while you're traveling, but 6 months after you come home from travel, which is a surprise to people. So you want to make sure, and that's why travel advisors can help you with that. They will ask for your passports and want to know your information. Well, when you're booking flights, you have to have the passport information exactly as it is on your passport for your flights as well. So,
and now as Michigan residents, or just in general, it's across the country, right? You need an enhanced ID.
Yes, you do.
As well, even for the States, when you're going to get on an airplane starting in October this year?
In October this year, yes, absolutely.
So, going through the list, if you're a frequent traveler, it may be helpful to have a TSA pre-check or clear, or the international kind of expedited line. As with everything, planning reduces anxiety. It also builds in the time for the anticipation that is such an important part of the joy of travel.
Right. And so, and there are studies out there that prove that anticipating a trip gives you just as much joy and happiness as sometimes going on the trip. I know when I got back from a trip, I was feeling that sort of travel letdown. But if you have your trips planned out like in Wonderlist, where you have a 3 to 5 year plan of all your trips, you are always anticipating the next trip, and so you're always on a high of, oh, okay, we came back from this trip, but now this is the one I have to look forward to.
I have a good friend who I think she de-stresses by travel planning. So I'll know when she's like having a stressful moment, because she'll be like, we travel for business together. She'll be like, have you booked this trip and done this? And I'm like, I am not that person. Like, it's a little bit stressful for me because there's other balls in the air. And so I'm like, oh, okay, what's going on? I know you like to, travel, like travel planning is your de-stress, but don't do it with our travel planning, like, unless you're going to do it for me. But that anticipation is so powerful. Okay, so retirees love traveling. I know they do. That's what I hear almost every time somebody's thinking about what's happening in retirement. And I've already mentioned that it's really important that, you don't wait and put everything off until someday. But when you get to that point in retirement that you're ready to go, what kind of trends are you seeing? What should people be doing? I know that we need to plan the money side, because those are big expenses. These are not, an $800, I'm going, 4 hours to the next city over. These are like, there's more time involved. You don't want to do it halfway, which I appreciate and applaud. But what kind of trends are you seeing in retirement?
Well, one of the things I would recommend, of course, is to have a financial planner who's got you ready for that, because you can have the time and not have the money. So right. You want to have both, right? The time and the money.
It should be planned out as a separate goal in many cases. So that's an element of our financial plan for sure.
And I like that about Wanderlist too, is that not only are you able to choose your destinations, but you can choose your experiences. So some of the top destinations that are still kind of forefront for 2020 and beyond are places like Italy and Greece and France, and Japan has come into the list, but I think too Olympics are coming up too in Japan. So that's becoming a hot item.
That's
as well.
This year thing, huh?
Yes, and my son, when he went through Wanderlist, he had that as one of his top destinations, and I couldn't figure out why at first, except that it's also a huge culinary destination, and he's huge into Michelin restaurants and culinary and that kind of thing. So some that are on the rise are like Croatia, Antarctica.
Just had a client get back from Antarctica.
Yes. Iceland, which has been the last few years, Japan again, and Portugal. Family favorites are Hawaii, Italy, Orlando, Costa Rica, England. I think that retirees really like some comfort, but they also like to see unique and different things. So going to some of maybe the UNESCO sites, which are sort of cultural, artistic, architectural type places that are designated around the world, that's kind of a cool way. Ancestry travel is big right now. So people going back to their roots,
right,
wanting to see where they came from. But in particular, retirees are looking at sort of celebration travel with milestone birthdays, 60, 70, anniversaries, special anniversaries, 50th anniversary, and then kind of incorporating that with multi-gen by including their family in that, their extended family, children and grandchildren. I am excited about the skip gen travel, which is where grandparents are traveling with their grandchildren. And since I have a new grandson, this is highly interesting to me, and I hope to be called Nana Adventure.
I love it. Go Nana Adventure. I even have a couple clients who are really special aunts. They don't have kids themselves, but they spend a ton of time with nieces and nephews where they are planning. It's really important to them to have special travel with those kids that are meaningful to them. And they often will pick, I know several people that say, on the 10th birthday, we'll do each of you will get a trip to Disney or something like that. And that's really, talk about anticipation, talk about special, something the kids will talk about forever. I also know somebody who travels individually with each of their adult children. So this is a couple. And he and she have 3 kids, and each of them takes a trip with each child each year. So that, this is a family that's spending more time traveling, more resources to do that. But, think about it. I did a solo trip with my son when he was in kindergarten to Washington, D.C. And so I've thought about what will the trip be with Josie, because she's coming up to that, it's that time for her as well. It was really special for him and I to make decisions together. It's nice because if you travel with a child, you can really target to their desires and needs, which is more challenging when you're doing a bunch of generations at once, like a bunch of ages at once.
Right, and you really want to, a lot of what travel is kind of connecting with loved ones. And so if you can bond and connect through travel, then it becomes such a more unique and memorable experience for everyone involved. And I think you could extend what you're saying, these parents with their adult children traveling. Like you said, you did a trip with your son. Yeah, parents can do that with individual children and their family as well to make that special time come out. And it doesn't have to be a huge trip. It could be a weekend trip away to visit. I know some people take their girls down to Chicago to the American Girls.
Totally.
I mean, so that becomes a unique travel experience.
It doesn't have to be a huge budget.
It does not.
Everyone values time in a world where there's so much distraction. Having one-on-one time with someone that's special to you is really powerful, especially if you live far apart or just life is busy, right? So having that time together is a really big deal. We're going to share a couple articles that you think are really powerful, and I agree, that are specific to retirees as well.
Yep, those will be in our slides.
So we've mentioned quite a few travel trends. Anything else you would mention, Beth, about what is right now, what is emerging? I know I love the combination of travel and volunteerism. That's something that quite a few people I know have kind of incorporated into their life. Anything else you would mention?
So I think if we look at that authenticity, we did talk a little bit about that, but another kind of growing trend is sort of transformational travel, which involves, I think it involves more of planning before you go, what kinds of things you might see or do, then experiencing it, and then reflecting upon it when you come back. I know I've had some really transformational experiences in my travel history. One was spending a summer in Germany with a host family when I was in college, and traveling around Europe a little bit while I was there. And that became sort of that was the first time I'd been overseas, was in college, because we'd done all of our travel was in the US and Canada when I was young. And it became sort of the tipping point for me as far as travel and seeing the world in a unique and different way. And I think that transformational travel is so unique to each individual that you could go even, a weekend up north and have a transformational travel experience, or you could, go to Mount Everest and have a transformational travel experience. So it just depends on the person. But I would say that goes along with authenticity.
Totally agree. I think it's helpful. We do some business planning, even in the summer out on my pontoon boat, right?
Yes.
So Morgan and I will leave the office and the walls that are very transactional and go, to think higher and further and deeper.
Yes.
And I've had clients go to retreats, silent retreats. After a divorce, men or women may need cleansing, a refreshing, or a big change, a major loss, all of those types of things, or just big personal ambitions and goals. And it could also be, you've mentioned celebration travel, and certainly we all think of milestones, but it may be a personal reward to, resilience, to resolve, to investing in oneself.
Right. And I think I'd have to add in there the whole sustainable travel, looking at avoiding over tourism in certain locations so that you're spoiling the actual destination. I think that we really have to kind of be forward thinking, and volunteerism comes into that a little bit. I think there are so many unique companies. There's a company called Me to We that does specific, they actually immerse themselves in a destination like Ecuador or Africa, and their trips include parents, grandparents, children working together with the community on things that the community needs, the local community needs. And those can be so transformational and so bonding as you work together to build a house for a family, or something in a school for children overseas, that we are giving back.
I love that. There's the similar emerging trends in investing, which I talk about. Environmental, social, and governance investing is an alignment of values. It's an emphasis on sustainability. And people, especially women and millennials and younger, are very drawn to aligning the way they want to live life, their values, with with their financial decisions, whether it's travel or investing. So I think we'll
So
only be
cool.
seeing more of that over time.
I love that.
So all of this is useful and can be incorporated into a do-it-yourself traveler.
Sure.
A hybrid where some things you're making your own decisions and others you're consulting with a professional, or someone who says, I know I can make the decisions, but I choose not to due to time or circumstance. Tell me why you might choose to work with a travel professional.
There's lots of reasons to work with a travel professional, and I think I learned that firsthand when I did my destination wedding. I decided that, first of all, I hadn't retired yet. I was busy working, and I really didn't know that much about it. And although I did my own research, I decided to hire somebody to help me kind of coordinate everything and everyone, because it was going to be more than just myself and my husband going on this trip.
There were multiple personalities
involved. There were. And so what I love too about that whole trend and what I learned is that now I can understand the value, and I think that once you've worked with a travel advisor, you do get the value. There are more. A friend of mine went to New York City for her. Was it her 35th anniversary? I think it was, wedding anniversary. And she booked her hotel through me, but with my connections, I was able to get her an upgrade on her room that they couldn't really afford, but it came as a perk by working with me. So there are things that happen with travel advisors, and we're there before, during, and after. So if your plans change, we change with you, and we're right there to help you. If something happens overseas, I had a family go to Europe this summer for the Women's World Cup. Cool trip.
Love it.
And she called me and said, we can't get into our hotel. They'd gotten there after hours, and there was a key deposit box that they needed to go to, but which she had gotten in her emails but forgot about.
Right.
So, but I was able to quickly locate all the information she needed, but she called me and she was in within minutes. So I think that people forget that we're an advocate on your side. Another thing that I love, especially about Wanderlust, is I get to know my clients much better that way, because I know their interests, the way they like to travel. They don't have to use me for all their travel. When you're a Wanderlust customer or client, you can do your own travel. You have the plan. What I find is that because I know them so well, and I'm working with them, and they understand my value, that they often do use me for trips. But if you take a weekend trip away, we can put that into your Wanderlust calendar, and I just won't plan another trip during that time. So it becomes kind of a planning tool, as well as a way for us to kind of build our relationship and trust with each other.
That makes sense. And I think it is a question of desire, time, and experience. Just like a financial planner, you have choices. There are certainly some people that are both equipped and really enjoy making all of the personal decisions.
Absolutely.
That is their hobby and affinity.
Right.
And for me, it's been different in different points in my life as well.
Sure.
And some of it is a question of access. So certainly, I remember on our honeymoon, we were upgraded. We had picked a splurge hotel and the most moderate room.
Right.
But our agent had, called ahead, said we were on our honeymoon. We had a wonderful, suite overlooking a port in the Mediterranean. So, those types of things are beneficial, but to me, it's the organization and getting to the point without anxiety and stress.
Right.
That I find for some people to be an important consideration.
And I don't have anything against people booking online and doing their own travel. I just want to caution people that what you see isn't always what you get. Mm-hmm. So make sure when you're doing that you're actually looking and asking the right questions, and making sure that somebody online is going to be helping you out when you get there and it's not what you thought it was. So I just want to caution people when they're doing that. I have done that before. I booked online, and it can be a wonderful experience. It can also not be a great experience. So
right.
be careful.
Yeah, and we've heard those things. I've used VRBO and Airbnb in certain circumstances, like our annual ski trip with friends and kids. That's absolutely the best way to go. But there's emerging, kind of Airbnb factories where you can see that there's a lot of bait and switch.
Yes.
There's lack of accountability in some cases. So take everything with a grain of salt. And trust your experiences. Also, there's no guarantee with any travel. I always, like to say it would be great if there weren't those moments of, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about this or that? But especially as you go overseas or internationally, you've got to build in some capacity for this wasn't what I expected, but we're still having a wonderful time.
Well, and along those same lines, you want to make sure you have travel insurance. That's one thing that I highly recommend, because if you're spending a big amount of money on a bucket list trip and something goes wrong, you want to have that insurance that even though the trip might be ruined, you're not going to lose all your money in that trip.
I'm nodding, but I also take it with a grain of salt. I do not buy travel insurance for every plane trip. So I was just looking back through receipts for last year, and we did buy travel insurance to Switzerland. But typically I don't choose the travel insurance just because it adds up over time, and most times you don't need it. But there are certain cases where you really do. Also, if you have significant medical issues, I have a good friend. She's also a financial planner. It's very important to her and her husband to travel, and he has more medical conditions than the average person would, which is one of the reasons they so want to travel, because who knows what's next for them. And they did a big trip to Asia that was really important to them, and she even bought kind of the medical insurance where they will helicopter you out of anywhere or get you on a med jet. And so everybody's circumstances are personal.
Absolutely.
But that's certainly worth considering, and all of these go into planning, right? You can't do that spur of the moment.
And that's where an advisor comes in, is to help you with that. And I like like a financial planner, I also charge a fee for my services, because I don't want to be tied to a commission for what I'm selling. I want the client to get the best value, and sometimes that may mean me recommending something that's a lower commission to myself, but it works better for them and their families. So that's why I do charge a planning fee.
I love that transparency. So we have, there are the obvious resources, including TripAdvisor, Google Flights, Virtuoso, of course, Beth, you and your website.
Right.
And we've mentioned some articles too that we'll also include in our resource section of our show notes. So make sure that you check those out for additional kind of inquiry and research. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, Beth, how does that work?
Yes, please do. I am available at beth@orenda.travel. That's my email. And you can also go onto my website and if you're interested in filling out a journey form for your next travel planning, we can do that. And I always do free consultations. I'm very upfront. Once we've had our consultation and decided if we're a good fit for each other, then I will be upfront about any fees or things attached to that and how I work, and we can go from there. Also, there's that, like you mentioned, the article that I did, the blog post that I did about Wanderlust. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about this 3 to 5 year travel planning tool that combines sort of the Netflix destination experience with my travel expertise, please go on and check it out.
We'll make sure to include that. And of course, I'm Melissa Joy, and if you ever have questions for me, don't hesitate to reach out at melissa@pearlplan.com or give me a call. And we have a download right now for the 2020 calendar year, which is a financial goals and calendar for 2020, which gives you reminders about financial things. We've even included some notes reminding you to plan your summer travel earlier, not later. So don't hesitate to download that. I think it will be very handy as you plan your year. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be sure to keep you posted as those travel trends change and new and exciting opportunities come up. And thank you, Beth, for your time.
Thanks, Melissa. It's been great.